Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Wow. My name is Bill Montwheeler, and albeit for just a short time, I am still the Executive Director of the Industrial Truck Association. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce Mitch McDonald, the moderator of this year's President's Forum. Prior to founding Agile Business Media, Mitch worked at Connors Publications for 15 years in various and sundry capacities, especially with supply chain management and modern material handling. He is currently Group Editorial Director of DC Velocity and Supply Chain Quarterly. More importantly, the business industry press has recognized Mitch several times as being among the top 10 editors in his field in the country. Truly a great distinction. He and his wife Maria and their 3 children live in North Attleboro, if I could pronounce that, I'd be fine, North Attleboro, Massachusetts. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mitch McDonald.
Good morning. Thank you, Bill, for that very kind introduction, and thank you all for joining us this morning for the 2011 Industrial Truck Association's Annual President's Forum. I am truly both quite honored and humbled to be serving as your moderator this morning in what promises to be a series of highly informative and engaging presentations. I'm going to open with a few very brief remarks and then turn things over to the speakers you've really come to see, Mr. Bellini, Liu, Uritsuji, and Ruffner. In preparing for today's sessions and noting the international composition both of our audience and our roster of presenters this morning, I couldn't help but recall a recent column in DC Velocity in which we pointed out that perhaps the 3 biggest trends to affect our business in the past decade have been globalization, technology, and, well, candidly, Walmart. We're going to dispense with the Walmart portion of that trilogy for our purposes this morning and instead focus a bit more for a moment on the first 2. Globalization and technology. The world's largest retailer aside, it's really those 2 developments that have affected the logistics business, including its robust material handling sector, more so than any others over the past 10 years. Let's focus first on globalization, and then we'll contemplate for a few moments the impacts of emerging technologies, specifically on logistics and how it relates to satisfying the demands of an ever-changing 21st century world marketplace. There's simply no denying that once discrete national or regional economies have in fact grown into a unified global economy. As a result of this broad market-driven unification, many of the historic barriers to international trade and business have come tumbling down. As a result, we've seen heightened levels of competition across all geographies worldwide. That's not to say that international trade is anything terribly new, quite the opposite in fact. There's been international trade to some extent, depending on whose history you read, for well over 1,000 years. The reach and efficiency of that trade went through a steady progression over 900 plus years and expanded and improved at quantum levels in the very, very recent past. Today, a consumer in New York City is just as likely to find porcelain from Jingdezhen as from, say, Vermont. Likewise, a consumer in Rome is just as likely to find a sweater made in Dublin as a sweater made in Seoul. Many folks, in terms of globalization, like to focus on the cost-saving trends that result from going global. I think too often overlooked, though, are the revenue growth advantages. These advantages have grown consistently for the past 60 years, and as noted, have increased considerably and accelerated in the past decade. Consider that since the end of World War II, barriers to international trade have been consistently lowered in a steady progression, sparked by market demand and enabled through several international agreements, such as the General Agreement of Tariffs and Trade, or GATT, which in turn led to the foundation for the formation of the World Trade Organization. These are but 2 examples of initiatives that have led to profoundly greater free trade with the reduction or elimination of tariffs, the construction of free trade zones, the reduction of transportation barriers and costs, notably from the introduction of containerized intermodal shipping for ocean, air, and ground freight movements, the reduction, elimination, or at minimum, attempts at harmonization of government subsidies for local businesses. Now, certainly these initiatives have in no way been perfect, and they are not without critics. The point to be made, I believe, though, is that the sustained trend toward open world markets to global trade has been steady and ultimately has had a positive effect on the world economy. If nothing else, this steady march toward greater economic globalization has led to an extraordinary growth of worldwide production markets, and for both businesses and consumers, an exponentially broader array of available products, both foreign and domestic. Additionally, this globalization has seen the emergence of what can best be described as genuinely worldwide financial markets with better access to financing and capital, thus, and the current economic cycle notwithstanding, leading to even greater economic expansion. Most likely, the best singular example of the effects of rapid global economic expansion is China. In an essay published just last month, United States business and logistics consultant Jim Tompkins noted a number of facts about China, many of which, as few as just 10 or 15 years ago, may have seemed quite far-fetched to all of us, both here and abroad. In noting its rapid, almost meteoric rise to its position as a leading world economic power, Mr. Tompkins noted that China currently enjoys the world's #1 consumer market for luxury goods, ranks second in the world in the Fortune Global 500 companies list. We'll see 100 new cities in the top global 600 cities evolve over the next 15 years. Has grown exports by 20% in the first half of 2011. Has the fastest growing consumer market in the world. Has the world's highest percentage of its GDP coming from manufacturing. Has a World Bank forecast of 9.3% growth this year, and has a GDP that now accounts for 9.5% of the world's overall GDP. China expects to see exports rise 12.4% in 2011, but that will be outpaced potentially by a rise in imports at a rate of 13.2%. And China projects domestic retail growth to increase at the rate of 15 to 30% over the next 5 years. To say the least, China is no longer an emerging economy. It is, in point of fact, a fully emerged economy, and its global influence has emerged quite notably as well. And while certainly the most noted and often cited, China's story of economic growth is not solitary. Consider other nations, Brazil, India, Russia, and to a somewhat lesser extent, the host of other countries along what we call the Pacific Rim. All have seen a decade of rapid change and unprecedented growth. It's fueled by the trend toward globalization, and it's not likely to slow down in a sustained way anytime in the foreseeable future. Fueling the pace of accelerated globalization in the world in general, and in the logistics business specifically, has been the rapid emergence of enabling technologies. They allow us to do more, do it faster, and do it more efficiently than at any other time in human history. And like globalization, the pace of these changes and these technologies bring forth is not going to slow down. It can instead be counted upon to accelerate. At the risk of understating the point, the technology world that we live in today in 2011 is vastly different from even that just 10 years ago in 2001. In just the past decade, enhancements of existing technologies and the introduction of new technologies has changed the rules of the business game dramatically. We've seen extraordinary improvements in the capabilities and functionality of things like warehouse management systems, freight forwarding and transportation management systems, customs and compliance software, fleet management, diagnostic and reporting software, labor management systems, supply chain execution software, and most recently, the current hot technologies, if you will, demand planning and business intelligence and analytics packages. And this list could, of course, go on and on and on. We've also seen an explosion in the way all the data these systems rely upon is gathered, analyzed, and shared across an entire enterprise, including both internal and external business partners. Consider for a moment just one technology, radio frequency identification, or RFID. Perhaps no single technology in the logistics business received so much attention and media coverage in the first few years of this century. So much so that many business folks, yourself included, and myself included, I apologize, many business folks grew tired of all the hype. While the hype is diminished, the development and implementation of RFID systems is moving on at a steady and, again, accelerating pace, and it may yet affect operations in ways we may never have imagined. Further fueling the adoption of new technologies has been the interconnectivity of all these tools. A perfect example is the expansion in the use of vehicle-mounted computers on lift trucks. Not that long ago, the notion of a computer mounted on a lift truck prompting the operator and sharing operational data may have seemed the stuff of pure science fiction. Well, like so many things, it has morphed quickly into science nonfiction. And those onboard lift truck computer interfaces are just one singular example. It seems that not a month goes by that we at DC Velocity aren't reporting on some new advance or enhancement to existing and new emerging technologies. Next up, we're already seeing the emergence of cloud-based systems as the, quote, next big thing. It will allow the gathering, analyzing, and dissemination of critical operational and logistics business data shared over the internet, and that alone will change the way we have viewed technologies like ERP systems for years to come. And you can be sure that the operators of one of your lift trucks will be tapping into the cloud right from the driver's seat very, very soon, if not already. So what has the confluence of rapid economic globalization and equally rapid emergence of enabling technologies got to do with us in the logistics business? An awful, awful lot. Beyond efficiency, beyond productivity, and beyond the ability to use these technologies to make better logistics business decisions, technology has cleared the path to gaining a demonstrable competitive advantage through logistics. It's often been said in DC Velocity that the supply chain is the circulatory system of our global economy. The factories that take in the raw materials and pump out the finished goods are the heart of the operation. The networks of warehouses, distribution centers, roads, runways, rail tracks, and ports are the veins and the arteries of the system. Lift trucks, pallets, racks, ships, trucks, planes, and trains are the red blood cells that move everything through the system. And because the consumers of the world are demanding it, things are moving faster and more efficiently than ever before. And the pace, of course, again, here's that word, will continue to accelerate on us. It's in the evolution of global economies and advances in technologies and heightened consumer demands that we find an opportunity. So what is that opportunity? Well, we are all in the same world market. We're all looking to compete effectively and succeed. And in this day of technologically advanced global economies, how can we successfully differentiate ourselves? How can we offer something to our customers that exceeds the offerings of our competitors? It appears to come down to one word: speed. Yes, speed. Let me explain for a moment how we've evolved to this point in the context of some reporting we've done over roughly the past quarter century covering the logistics business. Nearly 20 years ago, in the midst of an interview I was conducting, a very high-profile supply chain consultant delivered what at the time was a rather striking pronouncement. "Quality is dead," he said. "Speed is king." The speaker was George Stalk, who was then Senior Vice President with Boston Consulting Group. His comment, again 1993, came at a time when the entire world seemed fixated on quality as the holy grail of business success. Whether it was product quality, process quality, systems execution quality, or any other type of quality, we were all convinced that paying attention to quality would ensure that we would come out on top. Stalk, who offered his observation while discussing how companies would seek to differentiate themselves from the competition in the future, was among the first to realize that quality was not sustainable in and of itself as a long-term differentiator. Though his 1993 comment elicited more than a few gasps at the time, it's now clear in hindsight that Mr. Stalk was right. Going back to the 1970s, you can trace the ways in which companies have sought to separate themselves from the pack. First, it was price, which we thought at the time was synonymous with value. But our world economy began to expand, and American businesses particularly learned some very, very hard lessons. Japanese automakers, for instance, took big bites out of Detroit's market share with a religion-like passion for quality initiatives. Probably in reaction to that, many companies made quality their focus in the early 1980s and into the 90s. Ford Motor Company is perhaps the most memorable example for many of us, but is by no means the only company that made quality job one. On the upside, we saw quantum leaps in product and process quality. But on the downside, companies were left again with the familiar and perplexing question: if everyone offers lower prices, if everyone offers high quality, How will we stand out from the crowd? How will we differentiate ourselves in the marketplace? Stock, again, saw the answer before many others: speed. And his comment back in 1993 hit me the moment he said it, and it has stuck with me to this very day. Over the years, covering the logistics, material handling, and supply chain fields as a business consultant, I have always been struck by what a well-designed and implemented supply chain strategy can do for a company. It can, without question, put a company at a clear competitive advantage. And it's not hard to see why. To succeed in business today, you need to build on all those value propositions we learned about in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Your price must be competitive. Your product or service quality must, at minimum, be on a par and match your competition. With those two components, you do have a foundation for success, but it's not enough. To rise above the crowd, you must also serve the customer in ways that clearly differentiate you from the others. And more, providing truly impressive customer service is the answer, and more, it comes down to one thing: speed. It's not hard to imagine why. Consider for a moment a customer who wants a product. They compare vendors. They determine that price and quality among vendors is largely on a par. What then will motivate them to choose one vendor over the other? Again, it's quite simple. If you can get the product to the customer faster than your competitor, you get the sale. You win. Your competitor loses. It all comes down to speed. Customers demand it, and the winners ultimately will be those that deliver it better than anyone else. And now, noting those of you here before us in the audience as our customers this morning, and in keeping with the theme of customer service and speed, and trying desperately to keep this session on schedule for Bill, I would now like to turn things over to Mr. Bellini. One housekeeping note before we begin the presentations from the presidents. You should all see before you a form which you can use to jot down any questions that might come to mind during the presentations. At the conclusion of all four presentations, we will have a brief Q&A. If you do have questions that you write down, simply pass them to the middle, and I believe Debbie or Chris will come by to gather them and pass them up. And now, Ambrogio Bellini is Senior Vice President with Toyota Material Handling Europe, as well as Managing Director of CSAB Corelli Elevatore SPA, and Chairman and Managing Director of LTE Lift Truck Equipment SPA, both divisions of Toyota Material Handling Europe. He is both the current and past president of FEM IT and also past president of the Italian Association of Lifting Systems. Mr. Bellini.
Okay, it's a great honor and a great pleasure for me to meet all of you here today and have the possibility to exchange once more views on common business-related matters. What I would like to cover with you is an overview of the macroeconomic factors in Europe and the relevant implication on material handling business, as well as expectation for the years to come. In addition to this, I see of interest for all of you to be updated on a subject which is becoming of a real importance for the material and the industry in Europe, which is the market surveillance. I will explain the concept later about that. But before to go any further, I think that it's always useful to review quickly what does means Europe. Europe is, for the geographical point of view, is today composed by 47 countries, out of which 27 belongs to the European Community and 17, Estonia was the latest coming through, will be January 2011. All of them have adopted euro as a currency. This is the so-called Eurozone. The map on the screen represents an overview on the member countries of Europe Community and the one have adopting euro. Needless to underline the complexity of the European market business environment. I think that a good starting point to understand where we are heading in Europe is to analyze the economic development over the past years and the forecasts for the coming years in terms of GDP. Providing the European performance remain well behind other countries in the world, like China, for instance, over the past year, the Europe GDP development shows a good but uneven recovery among member states. Top growth rate performance is Germany, while other large euro area economies are following but at a lower pace. The forecasted GDP development is indicating a sort of stabilization around 2%, but might be deteriorated. We are already seeing in this respect that it's going to be deteriorated. Aside this forecast, I think that it may be interesting to evaluate one of my preferred, I would say, drivers of the economy, which is the so-called economic sentiment indicators. This index is measuring the consumer confidence alongside with the confidence in industry, service, construction, and retails when compared with GDP, and it differs substantially among European countries, as illustrated in the chart. Dark green is higher, light green is lower. As you can see, the overall ACI index is still improving, but the pattern is rather different compared with the recent history, compared 2 years ago, more or less. Fiscal policy and stimulus packages in the EU have rebuilt ACI confidence, today predominantly driven by an higher consumer confidence, while the industrial, service, construction, and retail's confidence is subdued. To be noticed that no later than 1 year ago, the confidence indicator on industry and service were higher, while the confidence on consumer, construction, retail was rather weak, exactly the opposite. Under today's circumstances, considering the country deficit, public debts, bank credit restriction, unemployment, inflation, it is likely this index might deteriorate in the near future. In this respect, it might also be interesting to have an additional look to the inflation trend and the relevant forecasts for the top 5 EU economies, which more than others have the impacts on our business, since they represent almost 70% of material lending market in Europe. This according to the WITS figure. Inflation rose in the euro area resulting from commodity price pressure, but is expected to stabilize around 2% in the coming year. This is what is forecasted. That is probably will be like that. Just a comment for you. It's to be noticed that UK, using the graph, is not part of Eurozone. Even if, but it's important to have an understanding because it's one of the most important markets for material lending in Europe. Okay, with all said, now moving in our business in EU. The chart represents the European market development over the time. After the peak that's been recorded in 2006-07 and the sharp and fast drop experienced in 2009, it is evident we are experiencing a recovery since some time now. To be noticed that, as it was in all other regions, the overall economy drop in EU had more impact on counterbalance, class 1, 4, and 5, rather than warehouse, class 2 and 3. And the recovery is faster for warehouse rather than CVs. So, today's scenario. In summary, what can say? The economy recovery was solid in the past period, but the unemployment remains high with the risk to hold back the general consumer confidence. There are risks in certain Europe countries related to development of support policy, high debt rate, insufficient progress on banking system repair, oil price, political social problem, and so on. The GDP growth rate may slow down in the coming period due to the number of still open uncertainties. There are signs already in the latest GDP forecast in more than one major EU country. Under the circumstances where the economy has turned the corner for the Great Recession, the today EU market recovery is largely driven by Germany and few other countries. However, it seems too optimistic to foresee the EU market will continue to grow at this pace. The latest economic forecast might drive this growth to a bit flatter, I would say W-shaped development. A statement that has been shared many times with some of you is back to 2006-07 level by 2014. I think that this may be a challenge for Europe. In essence, market unpredictability, volatility, it was we should expect in the near future in Europe. Latest items in my agenda, market surveillance. I would like now to introduce my third subject, as I do believe this is of great importance for manufacturers that want to sell in Europe, the market surveillance. The system of market surveillance in Europe shall ensure the compliance of products to safety, environmental, exhaust emission legislation controlled by the market surveillance authorities. This is something in common with other regions in the world, and also Europe have legislation in place applicable for industrial track. The system itself is very liberal. All manufacturers can confirm their compliance to the applicable legislation by their own. No third-party certification is requested. On the other hand, authorities are obliged to perform product checks regarding the fulfillment of applicable legislation. This is the market surveillance process, all this. This sensitive subject was introduced first time by FAM Industrial Track during the last year IDO meeting in Istanbul, with the aim to have the participants informed about a more proactive approach the EU Market Surveillance Authority decided to play in the near future. The major aim is, of course, to prevent accidents with not compliant unsafe industrial track, which is in the interest of authorities, manufacturers, and users, but also environmental issues are concerned and may be even more in the future. In this activity, the Market Surveillance Authority will be fully supported by industry and association, and FAM is contributing with this knowledge by providing a brief guide for identification of not compliance industrial track. You see the FAM website if you want to read more and download if you like. A significant number of not compliant equipment was seen at the Birmingham exhibition, was last year I think, and even more during the recent CEMA 2011, without any punishment for exhibitors. So, what's next? As far as the material handling sector is concerned, what is to be expected in the near future is a formal follow-up on market surveillance authority action against violation that has been found at CEMA 2011. Several press releases on an article regarding legal consequences for operators of not compliance industrial track that were or will be punished. From the FMET side, we are going to prepare the fourth chapter regarding technical details for a brief guide for identification of non-compliant industrial track. Other FEM, as you know, FEMET is just a portion of the total FEM. Other FEM product group will join the initiative of FEM Industrial Track and will publish there a brief guide of identification of non-compliant their products. Could be crane, could be other products. And finally, I would like to mention that on November 24 this year, there is a EU conference on market surveillance where FAM will have the opportunity to actively participate to this conference. Needless to say, given the increasing importance of market surveillance in Europe, other business sectors aside material handling will move in the same direction. And finally, I would like to terminate my presentation with a FEM-AT appeal to all truck manufacturers. An increase of unsafe truck in operation will result in more accidents. This is detrimental for any manufacturer of industrial truck. So we request all ITO members to appeal to their member to use the worldwide agreed standard ISO 3691 regarding safety and obey national legislation regarding exhaust and outdoor noise emission. Otherwise, government might get in favor of third-party certification. And, correct me if I'm wrong, those additional costs and bureaucracy burden would not be in our interest. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Bellini. Our next speaker is Mr. Liu Daming, President of Beijing Materials Handling Engineering and Research Institute and the professor-level senior engineer. He began his career there in 1982 upon his graduation from Northeast Heavy Machinery Institute with a bachelor degree in mechanical engineering. He also serves as the 4th and 5th session president for the China Industrial Truck Association, as well as the standing director of the Chinese Mechanical Engineering Society, president of the Logistics Engineering Institute, vice president of the China Construction Machinery Association, chairman of the Lifting Appliance Standardization Administration of China, vice chairman of the Industrial Truck Standardization Administration of China, and vice chairman of the National Special Equipment Safety Technical Committee. Mr. Liu.
Dear Presidents of the associations, President Ruffner, President Bellini, and President Shuji, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Today, we are glad to be present at the ITA annual meeting on behalf of CITA. This is my second time to attend the meeting, getting together with new and old friends to share the information of macroeconomic situation and the development of the material handling industry in the major international markets. CITA thanks ITA for choosing this beautiful venue with wonderful preparation. Thank you, ITA, for being our host. Here, I would like to share with you in three aspects. The first one is China's macroeconomic situation under new circumstances. The second one is the development of China's industrial truck market. And the last one is the development trend of China's industrial truck market. Okay, so here we comes the first one. The development trend of China's industrial truck market. And first is from the whole, the major economies have been growth slowed in the international economic environment. Facing faltering global economic recovery, stubbornly high in unemployment, and the increasing risk of property bubble and inflation among some emerging countries, in the regional areas, due to miscellaneous economic factors like the sluggish economic growth in the USA, worsening sovereign debt crisis in Europe, and turbulence in Middle East and North Africa, sudden disaster, as well as the riots and violence incidents caused by recession in some countries, the economic situation in this year is even complicated.
复苏缓慢，
The recovery process is seen slow recovery with fluctuating curve.
下面我们再看一下中国的宏观经济形势。
As to the macroeconomic situation in
可以说
China,
中国的经济机遇与挑战
we have
并存
both opportunities
发展
and
的条件
challenges.
比较多多方面的
There are
发展
many
积极性也很
advantages
高
for the development,
特别
and
是
each
今年国家
participant
新的5
work
年发展
actively
规
for
划
development,
今年是国家新的
especially
5年
as
发
the
展规
first
划的
year
开
of
始
12
阶
five-year
段各行各
plan.
业加快发
Every
展的
industry
愿望
has
很强
strong
烈
desire to
但是
accelerate
面临的
forward.
挑战也不少
However, there are also challenges. Besides the systematic and structural problems which remained for years, some serious problems from economic activity are not relieved. The macroeconomic is facing heightened pressure with soaring price and mounting inflationary pressure.
一些城市的房价还在上涨
Property transactions
宏观
keep
面临较大
shrinking,
的压力
but the house price is even increasing.
通胀与保持
In
经济
this
平稳
situation,
发展的两难问题表现尤为
two
常见
dilemmas
这
about
两难
how
问题一
to
边是
hold down
通胀的压力
inflation
持续不减居民
and
消
how
费
to
价格
prevent the
总水平
fast-growing
连创新高
economy from being overheated arose the most attention.
融资贵的问题突出，生产经营压力加大，
Due to the ever-increasing inflation pressure,
物价
the residents' consumption price level keeps increasing. On the other hand, some middle or small enterprise feel it's hard and expensive to raise funds, thus the pressure in production and operation is even more serious.
中国 GDP 的情况，目前来
This
看，
chart shows the GDP of China since 2006. At present, it seems that GDP changes from 90.6 in third quarter of last year and 9.8 in quarter 4 to 9.7 in quarter 1 of this year and 9.5 in second quarter, that it is to say. This rate remains stable between 9.5 and 10%. The growth of China's GDP reached 9.6 in the first half of 2011.
主要是得益于投资
Thanks to the
和
fast
拓展
growth of investment and export, the economic growth rate is higher than the anticipation in the market. However, the rate declined from quarter to quarter due to the slower consumption
国家
growth,
对汽车行业
which is related to the estate control and exit the support strategy of vehicle industry.
但控制
The economic growth in future is
会波及
optimistic,
到消费的
but
发展
inflation control affects the consumption development.
任重道远。
And therefore, we have a long way to go in economic structure adjustment. It's always difficult to coordinate the short-term targets and long-term targets.
刺激的
In future, the economy in China will shifting to self-initiated growth from previous overheating expansion spurred by the economic stimulus.
我们再看一下
Okay,
2009
here
年1月
from
到
we would like to
2011
see the
年7月
consumption
中国
price
居民消费
index
品
from 2009 to July 2011, CPI.
从这个图表上可以看出，从2009年的1月份到
From January
7月份
2009 to July
不断攀升的食品价
2011,
格
the escalating CPI in China, mainly driven by the surge in food price. In the recent decade, China went through twice notable rise in price from 2003 to 2004 and from 2007 to 2008. The increasing period of CPI are 27 months and 24 months. Until July 2011, the CPI has been increasing for 25 months.
即将出现拐点，
And we still need further investigation to see whether the break point is
成
coming.
本的增长，
According to the trend in the later
价
pace,
格运行仍然
there are
存在着
still
一些
some
不确定的因素
uncertain factors in the price movement,
全球经济
such as
复
the
苏前景
unclear
尚不明
prospect
朗
of global economic
国内能源
recovery
资源
and the fast-growing demand for domestic energy
目
resources.
前在既有的方
Based on the
政策基
existing
础上
policies,
官方未
the
来还将
authorities
重
will
点
take
采
the
取
following
必
four
要措施
main
以稳定
measures
价
to
格
keep price in
这些
check,
措施包括
which
对流动
includes
缓解经济
continue to
经济紧张
reduce circulation
第
fee,
二是完善社会
improve
控制
social
的保障标准
security,
与物价上
and
涨的
break
联动
down
机制
the hoarding of goods and speculation to keep price in
加
check,
强粮食深度
strengthen the supervision in market price, increase supplies of grain, pork, and vegetables to keep farm produce price basically stable.
2006年到
This chart shows China's fixed asset investment in urban area from 2006 to the first half year of 2011. Compared with same period of last year, China's fixed asset investment rose 25.6% to hit 12.46 trillion yuan during the first half year of 2011. From January to July, the investment is 15.24 trillion yuan, which has increased by 25.4% compared with that in 2010, and it's also 0.2 percentage point lower than that of the past 6 months. The investment in the state-owned or state-holding assets reached RMB 5.28 trillion, which has increased by 13.6%. On a once-on-one basis, the investment in the fixed asset in July has increased by 0.27%. Here we comes the PMI. From July 2010 to August 2011, China's PMI have fell to 50.7%, which is 0.2% lower than that in June, which is fourth consecutive decline and a 29-month record low since March 2009. But it's at a turning point and expansion scope is over 50%. It indicates the overall economy of Chinese manufacturing industry is increasing, but at a relative low speed. In August 2011, the PMI was 50.9%, which is 0.2% higher than that in July. Although it's the second lowest point since March 2009, it's still at a turning point. The expansion scope is over 50%. In addition, the decline trend is ended. In the current manufacturing enterprise, the main difficulties and problems in their manufacturing and operation include: first one, the fund turnover is even harder, because more and more suppliers adopt the strategy of cash on delivery. The second one is the price of raw material remains high. Meanwhile, the cost in labor force and logistics is increasing. Thus, some enterprises cannot afford the burden. The last one is the natural resources, such as coal and gas, are in short supply. Here, I would like to introduce China's economic growth path in the future. The economy in China will be developed in the following aspects. First, continue to and improve macroeconomic control, maintain sustainable employment, a prudent fiscal policy, and stable monetary policy to strengthen the rapid growth. The second one is strengthen the adjustment of industrial structure, promote energy saving and emission reduction, raise the investment in the technology improvement and innovation, and realize sustainable development. The third one is to keep the overall level of price stable, protect and improve the residents' livelihood, and guarantee a harmonious and stable society. So, our future trend is to lower speed, control the price, and adjust the structure. Now let's have a look at the current development of industrial truck market in China. Industrial trucks are the basic equipment in the logistics. Logistics in China is in a fast development phase due to many factors. First of all, the demands are increased because of the rise in national economic volume, optimized economic structure, and better living conditions. Second, the trend is driven by the government policies. The direct publication are revitalization planning for logistics industry in 2009 and aid measures to boost logistics in the first half year of 2011. All this policy promote the orderly development of logistics. Last but not least, the logistics industry in China is still in the early stage of development, which cannot totally satisfy the requirement for national economic development. We are still far away from the developed country. We still have to rely on import products such as engine, electric control device, and hydraulic parts.
从2010
Here we would like to take a look at the sales industrial chart in global market. The sales volume of industrial chart in global market has been recovered since 2010, and the increasing trend remains in 2011. Each continent makes positive increase at different growth level in the first half year of 2011. Now let's take a look at China. From 2005 to 2007, the sales volume of industrial truck in China keep two-digit growth rate, affected by the poor market environment in the second half year of 2008. The overall sales volume in 2008 was obviously decreased. Due to the great impact of the financial crisis in 2009, the sales in the whole year showed the first negative growth in the 21st century. Thanks to the economic policy stimulation, the recovery of confidence and the demand accumulated in previous 2 years, the domestic market showed sharply increase. In consequence, the sales volume in the domestic manufacturing enterprise in the whole year breaks the best record in history. In 2011, the growth trend has been kept well.
这是去年上半年的和今年上半年，去年上半年和今年
To
上半年
compare sales
同比的
volume in the domestic manufacturers in the first half year of 2010 and the first half year of 2011,
和2011年的上半年，
the trend is quite
走
similar.
势还是比较相似的。就去
That
年和今
is
年都是前3个月爆
A
发
boom
式增
in
长，
March
后几个月呈
and
现
then a
阶段性
decline
的
step
下滑
by step in the following several months.
下面这是金融危机后国内市场销量连续2年的创造历史的新
After
记录，
global
说明了
financial
中国市场
crisis, the sales of domestic market create new historical records in 2 successive years. It shows the strong demand for industrial trucks in China market. In 2008, the sales volume in China reached 110,000 units. The sales volume was at a level of 114,964 units and up 3.6 year-on-year in 2008. Here we have several figures. So,
2009年还是保持了11万台。
in March 2010, a booming increase hit the Chinese market.
2010年3月份，中国的
However,
市场
the
出现
trend
了
went
爆发
down
性的增长
in April
随
and
后
May.
4月、5月又出现下滑。7月份
The
到
monthly
2011
order
年的2月份
remained
各月的
high
订
from
单量
July 2010 to February 2011.
2011年3月又出现了
In
爆发
March
式增长
2011, another boom occurred. However, due to national economic adjustment, the monthly order is decreasing.
目前来看，这种下
Currently,
滑还没有
the
出现
decreased
报复的
trend has not reached its lowest
2011
point.
年
The
在国内
sales
销售
volume in
是
2010 was 193,531 units, which had a 68.34% year-to-year increase. The sales volume in the first half year of 2011 reached 128,209 units, increased by 35.48%.
全年销售将达到23万台。
The total domestic sales volume for year 2011 is expected to be around 230,000 units, which will be increased by 18%.
中国工业车辆走过10年的高速
After 10 years of rapid development,
发展之路，行业存
the
在一些老
industrial
问
truck
题。
industry in China remains some old problem. Under the new circumstance after the financial crisis, some new problems raised.
增长的
The
速
old
度
problems
加
include
剧了
the over rapid growth makes the duplicate construction and homogeneous competition even
已
worse.
经具备了
In China,
超过40万台
now
年
the product capacity per year already reached 400,000 units
将达到超
and
过
will be
50万台年
500,000 units by
这样呢就加剧了
2015.
我们这个同质化的竞争。第二是技术进步与
Second
产
is
量发
the
展不同步
technology improvement is not synchronized with output development.
老问题的第
The
三个
product
是
structure adjustment and upgrade should further strengthen. Third one is the key components are still relied on the import. The last one is lack of professional experts in the industry. Here I mean especially the R&D engineers.
过去10年以来一直存在的这些老问题。
So this is
但是最近
the
又出现了一些新的问
old
题，
problems in the past 10 years.
价格的上涨，
For the new
人民币的
problems,
升值，人工
the
成本的上涨
competitiveness is weakened owing to the uprise of raw materials, RMB's appreciation, and the increase of labor force cost. The second new problem is that due to years of severe homogeneous and low price competition,
使得
there is no basis of technology development and innovation. We are still far away from the advanced world
贸
levels.
易保护
The third one is the domestic manufacturers face many difficulties in the export caused by trade protection and trade barrier.
最后，我要向在座的各位谈谈中国工业质量的
Last,
发展
I
趋
would
势。
like to talk about the future development trend for
未
industrial
来
truck
中国
market
工
in
业质量
China.
行业的发展趋势是：第一，
First,
物流业的效
the
率
market
提升
demand for industry trucks will be further increased with the improvement of logistics
使
efficiency,
用机器来代替人工。
labor force to be replaced by machines due to the increasing labor cost, the development of western regions, and the acceleration of urbanization process.
低碳环保。
Second is the proportion of IC truck and electric trucks will be changed due to the factors such as low carbon and environment protection. As well as the development in warehousing industry, the proportion of electric truck will higher year after year. The third one is currently in China market there are increasing requirements for the operating
越来越高。
environment and product performance from the domestic user, and the rise in the price for raw materials in the international market, the increased cost in the labor force, the appreciation of RMB, which will influence the sales price and the export volume. All these are forcing us to speed up the structural adjustment of the domestic manufacturers' production. Reasonable international division, suitable product price, with the remarkable quality will be the result of next round of international competition. Here I would like to end my speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Liu. Our next speaker this morning is Mr. Toshihiko Uratsuji, Chairman of Nippon Yusoki Company Limited, where he also in the past served as President and Managing Director. He is, of course, also the new President of JIVA, having assumed that role in the association in May of this year. Mr. Uratsuji.
どうも皆さんこんにちは。
Good morning, ladies and
ご
gentlemen.
紹介いただきました
Thank you for your
財務
kind
会長の長津
introduction.
今年の5月
I
に財務
became
の会長
president
に
of
就任
JIVA in May this year, so this is my first time to speak at the President's Forum. I am honored to have been invited and to speak to you. As has been our practice in the past, I would like to talk about the economy and the trend of the industrial truck market in Japan today. However, before I get into these subjects, I would like to talk about the great earthquake of East Japan in March of this year and how the earthquake and the resultant tsunami caused the nuclear power plant in Fukushima to fail, the effect of the earthquake disaster, and how the recovery effort is progressing. First, thank you for your kind words of sympathy, support, and encouragement. We received messages from around the world. Thank you very much. In particular, we received messages from ITA, FEM, CITA, and COSIMA. All these associations sent us messages. Immediately after the earthquake, 23 countries around the world sent rescue squads to Japan and conducted operations in a hazardous environment. The United States, China, Italy, Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, the countries represented here all sent rescue squads to help us, and I would like to personally take this opportunity to thank you for what your countries have done for us. The great earthquake of East Japan occurred on March 11, 2011 at 2:46 p.m. with the epicenter near the Sanriku coast in the northeastern part of Japan. It was a magnitude 9.0 earthquake, the fourth largest in the world since 1900. The map indicates the seismic intensity of the earthquake on the Japanese scale in different areas of East Japan, while level 7 in Burgundy was recorded in only a few areas. Seismic intensities 5 and 6 in red and pink were recorded in broader areas, including Tokyo. Tokyo experienced seismic intensity 5. There was virtually no damage to the buildings, but public transportation stopped and there were power outages in some areas. My company is located in Kyoto, some 450 miles away from the epicenter, but we felt the vibration, so you can imagine how strong this earthquake was. If the damage had been caused by the earthquake alone, it would have been much smaller, I believe. Japan is an earthquake-prone country. The structural requirements for buildings are very stringent, and in fact, there was not much destruction. The high-speed trains operating in the earthquake region are equipped with an early earthquake detection system, which enabled them to sense the quake quickly and automatically slow down, and there was no damage from derailment. So what caused the unprecedented damage this time? It was caused by the tsunami. Many areas which were hit by the tsunami this time were areas hit by past tsunamis. Based on past experience, major embankments had been built, but this tsunami was so big that it tore the embankments apart. On the map, you can see the height of the tsunami in different areas. To give you a broad picture, there were approximately 15,000 deaths, 4,000 missing, and about 5,400 were injured. There were 12,500 homes totally destroyed. If you compare this number to the number of homes totally destroyed after the Kobe earthquake, there is not that much difference. However, there were 2.4 times the number of people who died. More than 90% of the deaths were caused by drowning, and it seemed most of these deaths were caused by the tsunami. In other words, the number of victims would have been far smaller if it had not been for the tsunami. According to the Japanese government, the amount of damage caused by the disaster is estimated to be around 16.9 trillion yen, or $210 billion, which equals 3.6% of Japan's GDP in 2010 and 18.3% of the national budget for 2011. In addition to the earthquake and the tsunami, the other major issue in Japan is the impact of the accident at Tokyo Electric's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant and how the plant is being stabilized. Having been severely impacted by the major earthquake and the onset of the tsunami, the vibration caused by the earthquake was detected and the operation of the nuclear power plant came to a halt. However, emergency power generator for the emergency cooling system for the reactor core failed to operate, and for the first time in the history of nuclear power generation, there was a core meltdown caused by the major earthquake. The meltdown caused a large amount of radioactive materials to leak out, and in terms of the severity of the accident, it has been designated a level 7 for the first time since 1986, when there was another severe accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Because of this accident, residents in the areas surrounding the nuclear power plant were forced to evacuate, and they have not been able to return home to this day. With the nuclear power plants taken out of operation, there has been a shortage of electric power. Planned power outages took place in eastern Japan between March and April. Even the areas not impacted directly by the earthquake were thus affected in major ways. Currently, by the Fukushima Daiichi power plant, the issues are being addressed slowly but surely. On July 19th, the government announced that by cooling the nuclear reactor in a stable manner, the amount of steam generated has been reduced, the leakage of radioactive material has been reduced, and the goal for step 1, which was to steadily reduce the amount of radiation, has been achieved. Currently, they are trying to achieve the next step, which is to cool in a more stable manner. However, it will be some years before the fuel can be taken out, and so it is a long process. As of August, the amount of radiation measured in Tokyo is around 0.05 microsieverts. When a person flies a round trip between Tokyo and New York, he is exposed to 200 microsieverts. So life goes on as usual in Tokyo. In addition to the power outage, yet another effect of the earthquake disaster was the major economic impact on the supply chain. The automotive and the telecommunications industry both suffered because parts procurement from plants in the disaster areas stopped when these plants were destroyed and distribution channels were cut off. This caused their own production levels to drop significantly in March and April. This graph illustrates how the industrial production index fluctuated. Immediately after the earthquake disaster, there was a major drop similar to the drop that occurred after the Lehman shock. In May, however, it was on its way back to recovery. Production recovery is certain, based on the survey taken by the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry in June. 123 companies having production facilities in the earthquake-stricken areas were questioned about their recovery status, and 80% of them responded they had returned to their or exceeded their pre-earthquake levels. Among the remaining 20%, which had not returned to their pre-earthquake levels, 70% said they expect to return to pre-earthquake production level by the end of 2011. As for demand created by the reconstruction effect, 60% of manufacturers thought they would benefit from increased sales. Focusing on the Japanese GDP, after the earthquake disaster, the April-June period dropped by 2.1% over the previous quarter, and that is the third consecutive quarterly negative growth after a drop by 2.5% in the October-December period last year and 3.6% drop in the January and March period this year. However, the overall outlook is a positive one, with growth, however modest, in the July-September period after bottoming out in March. For the year, the outlook for major think tanks in the private sector is for zero growth on the average. One of the forces which will help push the economy forward is the demand created by the recovery and reconstruction effort replacing lost capital stocks. On July 29th, the government announced its basic recovery policy, including 23 trillion yen in expenditures. In particular, fiscal years 2011 to 2015 are marked to be the intensive recovery period, and 19 trillion yen will be spent during this period. A contribution to GDP is expected to be 0.6%, or 4 trillion yen in the first supplementary budget, and 0.3%, or 2 trillion yen with the second supplementary budget. With the third supplementary budget yet to be determined, another overall contribution to GDP is expected to be made accordingly. There are also some risk factors facing the Japanese economy. First, there is the power shortage. Immediately after the nuclear power plant failure in Fukushima, metropolitan Tokyo faced planned power outage due to the power shortage. However, this was implemented only in a limited area, and there has been no such power outage since March 18th. Without arriving at any decision in the discussion of how to achieve safety with nuclear power plants, other nuclear power plants, which had been taken offline for their periodic inspections, have been put on hold. Throughout the country, the power company's ability to provide electricity has been reduced, and there is a need to come up with short to mid-term solutions. On a short-term basis, power companies are reopening their old mothballed fossil fuel-based plants and helping themselves by making power available to each other. Customers with major power demands are being asked to conserve their use by 10 to 15%. Consumers in general are also being asked to conserve in order for the power companies to overcome the shortage. On a mid to long-term basis, natural energy power sources such as solar and wind will have to be explored. While there are expectations that new businesses and new demands will be created, such prospects do not provide an immediate solution to the shortage problem on hand. The government will have to establish its policy for the future on nuclear power. And in the meantime, we have to be prepared to face risks from power shortages for a short time. The second concern is damage caused by rumors, particularly in connection with radiation exposure. I do not think there is much concern anymore about industrial products. However, there is, when it comes to food such as beef and rice, radiation levels must be measured for safety. The third concern is the appreciated yen, which may have something to do with the uncertainty of the economies in Europe and the United States. This is a major risk factor for Japanese industries involved in export business. If the current tendency continues, more manufacturers may have to leave Japan. And the fourth concern is our chaotic politics. In order for to work out the details of the basic recovery mentioned earlier, we need strong political leadership. Mr. Noda, the new Prime Minister, formed its government on September 2nd, but we pray that disruptions caused by internal squabbles such as what we have seen in the past will not continue. Against this background, let me finally talk about the trend we see in the forklift market in Japan. First, as far as damage to a forklift is concerned, it is estimated that some 5,000 to 6,000 trucks were lost due to the tsunami and/or fire. Replacement lift trucks were needed, but because of disrupted production, new trucks could not be provided, and many used and rental units were made available free of charge to be used in the disaster areas. One Java member manufacturer developed and delivered lift truck equipped with cabins which were protected from radiation so that they could be used in the rubble removal operation inside the nuclear power plant premises. These machines will provide protection for operators while working in areas contaminated by radiation. The Japanese lift truck industry had recovered from the Lehman shock and had been on its way to recovery since 2010. However, when production stopped in March and April this year, sales dropped also. Since then, production is being restored, and by May, it had reached the same level as the previous year. And in June, production recovered with an increase of 20% or more, as if to make up for the past lost earlier. For calendar year 2011, although there has been production drop in March and April, we are expecting a 5% increase for the year. The 2012 Alliance meeting is scheduled to be held in Japan. By then, reconstruction work after the earthquake will be well on its way, and the nuclear power plant will be more stable. Please do not be overly worried. Please come. We'll be looking forward to your participation. We are truly looking forward to seeing you in Japan, so I encourage you to come to Japan. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Yoritsuji. Last, but certainly by no means least, I would like to introduce Jeff Ruffner, Vice President of Marketing for Mitsubishi Caterpillar Forklift America, or MCFA, who is the 2010-2011 President of the Industrial Truck Association. Mr. Ruffner.
Thank you, Mitch. Good morning, everyone. It is indeed a great honor for me to join our colleagues from China, Europe, and Japan to offer our views on the state of the market in our countries and around the world. First, we want to express to our friends in Japan the great relief we share in learning of your recovery from the earthquake and tsunami that struck Fukushima. The loss of life and the destruction of property are today even unbelievable. The civility and resilience of the Japanese people in the wake of such a tragedy has likewise been unbelievable and sets an example for human behavior to be followed by all nations and cultures. We wish you a continued speedy recovery. The general economy in the United States is limping along with recent predictions for almost no growth, and many are now warning of a double-dip recession. The continuing high unemployment rate, the lack of an increase in housing starts, the inability of the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the White House to deal effectively with our fiscal integrity, and the impending 2012 elections are all major concerns. We do need to get our several houses in order, focusing on repairing the economy instead of party politics and re-election. On the other hand, and thankfully the naysayers' predictions are out of step with what we are seeing in the material handling industry. Did you hear that? Thank you, Bill. Now, our predictions based on past performance and our best estimates about the future are positive. In fact, far more so than what we see in the general industry and the economy. Now, 4 times a year, the ITA surveys its board of directors and asks its members to estimate what new truck orders will be in the coming quarter and in the coming years. Now, before sharing the results of the latest survey, some background on the economy and industry will be helpful for perspective. Let me start with the broadest measure of economic health, which is gross domestic product. GDP rose at an annual rate of 1% in the second quarter of this year, which is weaker than earlier estimates. As recently as July, estimates had GDP increasing at 1.3%, so the picture changed quickly in the latter half of the quarter. The economy expanded at only 0.4% in the first quarter, so the recovery in the first half of 2011 has been much weaker than many anticipated at the start of the year. The economic malaise seems to be taking hold with consumers as they pulled back their spending sharply in the second quarter. A recent survey indicated that 8 of 10 now believe the U.S. economy is in recession. This is not technically correct, but we all know about the dangers of this perception. Nevertheless, most full-year GDP predictions remain in the 1.5 to 2% range, although it's looking more and more like the people that are leaning towards 2% are in the minority. Canada and Mexico are faring better, with growth rates that are predicted to be at 3% and 4% respectively. Generally, growth rates this low are bad news for the lift truck industry. Over the last 32 years, the U.S. economy has grown annually at a rate of 2.5% or higher 22 times. In those 22 years, the lift truck industry grew in all 22. During the 10 years that GDP growth was less than 2.5%, our industry declined in all 10. So, GDP growth, or lack thereof, is closely aligned with the lift truck industry, except this year. Despite the lackluster GDP performance, our business is growing in 2011. Why is that? Well, in large part, many think it's because of the strong recovery in manufacturing. Now, I'm going to sound too much like an economist for the next few slides, but please try and bear with me because I think they articulate well what many of us believe inherently to be occurring. Do we have any economists in the group, by the way? Just one? Well, I'm going to go ahead with this if it's just one then. An economist friend of mine recently told me, he said, Jeff, you know what the definition of an economist is? He said it's someone who likes to work with numbers but doesn't have the personality to be an accountant. So, for a sales guy, that's a twofer, right? We get to take a shot at two groups at one time. So. Now, in this chart, the blue bar is GDP, and the green bar is manufacturing production. Manufacturing activity is more heavily impacted by the business cycle than the overall economy in the U.S. This was particularly pronounced in the last recession. This chart shows the quarter-to-quarter percent change in annualized rate in inflation-adjusted GDP in physical unit manufacturing production. Manufacturing declined far more than the overall economy in the 08 and 09 recession and is now far outperforming the general economy during the recovery. Manufacturing production growth is expected to continue to outpace GDP into the near future. However, manufacturing growth rates don't convey the cyclical position of manufacturing relative to its production peak. This is a key point, so for this reason it's important to look at the level of production, which is shown here as an index. For the overall economy, GDP fell 5% during the last recession. By fourth quarter 2010, GDP had recouped most of the output that it lost in the recession and is expected to transition into the expansion phase of the cycle in the latter half of this year. Manufacturing, on the other hand, declined 20%, 4 times as much as the general economy, from the peak in December 07 to its trough in June of 09. Now, the positive news is that manufacturing production has increased 11% since then, over twice the growth rate of the overall economy, and is still in the recovery phase. It has another 11% to go to be fully recovered, which is not expected to occur until the second quarter or third quarter of 2014. Now, not only was the 08-09 manufacturing recession the worst since the 1930s, but the seemingly strong pace of recovery has not kept pace with the recoveries from other severe recessions. Manufacturing industrial production is shown here as an index where the fourth quarter 07 cyclical peak is equal to 1. This is the blue line. The series extends through the recession, which officially ended in the second quarter of 09, and follows the recovery through the end of next year. Overlaying the current cycle in this chart is the average of the 74, 75, and 81, 82 cycles, which is the green line. These were the previous two longest and most severe recessions in post-World War II history before the 08-09 recession. So from the trough in second quarter 09 to the first quarter of this year, U.S. manufacturing has grown 11%. In the first 7 quarters of recovery following the other two severe recessions, manufacturing production increased 17%, substantially faster during the recovery. Now, we're talking a lot about economic cycles, and we all have a basic understanding of them. However, a quick look at this graphic of a typical cycle might be helpful as we continue on. The cycle has 4 phases: accelerating growth, accelerating decline, and decelerating decline. Economies, industry groups, individual industries, and companies are all somewhere in this cycle. Most manufacturing industries in the U.S. are now in the growth phases. Material handling equipment, for example, is apparently in the decelerating growth phase. Having grown 40% in 2010, it is now growing at a little more moderate 30% growth rate. Now, this chart's a little busy, but it shows the percent change in production levels from the pre-recession peak to now for 40 manufacturing industries as a way of gauging those industries' positions in their economic cycles. Several manufacturing industries are in the expansion phase, having regained all of the production lost in the recession and posting even higher growth. These industries, of course, are in high-tech information technology fields, household consumable goods, healthcare, and energy. At the other end of the spectrum are the manufacturing industries where current production levels are substantially below their cyclical peaks. These industries are, for the most part, supplying the housing market and the construction sector and have current production levels 20 to 40% below pre-recession levels. Industries in the middle, and there are many, are in recovery. And the main point I want to make here is that the recovery in manufacturing is very broad-based, with most industries growing and with only a few that are not, albeit some important ones. Now, here's a more qualitative way of looking at the recession severity for those same manufacturing industries relative to the strength of their recoveries. The most positive outcome, a mild recession and very strong recovery, was experienced by the computer equipment industry. For this industry, production declined only 3% during the recession, yet has grown 30% since June of 2009. At the other end of the spectrum, a very severe and ongoing recession hit the textile furnishings industry. Its production declined 35% in the recession, and there has not been any recovery since the middle of 2009. The other two corners of the table show good news and bad news combinations for recession and recovery. Ship and boat building, communications equipment, and breweries experienced only a mild recession, but output continued to fall over the next 2 years. Now, key to this chart, the iron and steel, foundries, industrial machinery, metal working machinery, and motor vehicles and parts industries went through very severe recessions. I think we all know that. But on the upside, they have seen very impressive recoveries. The iron and steel industry, for example, saw production fall 50% during the recession, yet output increased 70% in the last 2 years. It is these industries, plus a broader group that experienced average to severe recessions and now average to strong recoveries, that are, in my opinion, driving the growth in our industry. Now, despite the optimistic predictions for continued manufacturing growth, there is naturally a caveat and a cause for concern. Preliminary figures released in August for Q2 show almost no manufacturing growth, and you can see by this chart that the brakes have been applied very, very quickly to the manufacturing growth that we've been seeing over the last 2 years. Now, many people believe these results were heavily impacted by part shortages in the aftermath of the earthquake and tsunami in Japan, and a spike in gasoline prices following the Arab Spring uprisings. If this is the case, we hope it is, we should see some bounce back in production in Q3, barring, of course, all of the other mixed economic news that we've been seeing in the past few weeks and, of course, just the past few days. So now, finally, let's try and talk a little more specifically about lift trucks. This graph shows U.S. and Canada lift truck industry orders and shipments as a 12-month moving average from '82 to 2011. As we all know too well, demand for lift trucks is highly cyclical, and like most capital goods, it's tied to general economic activity, as we saw earlier. The vertical gray bars that are shown here are official periods of recession in the U.S. economy, and the correlation to our order rate is very clear. Coming out of the recession, after 3 consecutive years of double-digit declines, our industry grew 39% in 2010 and is now up 31% year-to-date August. Now, one of the things I think that's most interesting about this chart, I want you to notice the demand peaks over this span of time were preceded by what I would call false peaks. Naturally, we're all hoping that what we see in the next few months, because I know many of us are anticipating some pullback in this order rate that we don't fully understand. We hope that what we're seeing is another false peak and is not indicative of the double-dip recession that we're hearing so much about. Now, here's a more detailed look at the last few years' orders, and also now finally our members' forecasts for 2011 and 2012, which were done in July of this year. Orders are shown for ITA classes 1, 2, and 3, with 4 and 5 shown together. The last 2 bars on the right are forecasts for 2011 and 2012, respectively. Members expect orders in 2011 to finish 20% higher in 2009, so they are expecting some pullback from that 30% rate that I mentioned year to date. Orders in 2012 are expected to grow another 11% to almost 180,000. And these numbers, by the way, as the chart shows, are for U.S., Canada, and Mexico. We added Mexico a couple of years ago. If you're like me, I still connected to the U.S. and Canadian numbers, so subtract about 7,000 units from this and you'll get back to numbers that perhaps you're more accustomed to looking at. Now, here's another look at these numbers in a format emphasizing mix by product class. One of the more profound trends in our industry over the last several years is the shift to electrics from IC, moving from 56% of the total in '06 to 63% in 2010. The peak of 67% in '09 was surely driven in part by economic factors, but the move to electrics clearly has some staying power. Due to heightened concerns with fossil fuels and advances in technology, many of us believe that electrics will never again be less than 60% of the North American market. And this prediction is borne out by the recent order rates and is reflected in our members' most recent forecasts. Now, here's one last look at these numbers, this time over a longer time span. This graph shows total industry orders, which are the vertical bars, and orders by class, which are the horizontal lines. Again, electric product types 1, 2, and 3 are shown separately, and IC classes 4 and 5 are together. IC 4 and 5, that's the top line. I show this because it connects back to the point we were making earlier about manufacturing driving this economic recovery. IC products predominate in manufacturing industries. Because manufacturing activity is more heavily impacted by the business cycle than the overall economy, demand for IC products is more heavily impacted by the business cycle than electrics. Now, the optimist takeaway here is that IC products have the same upside growth potential predicted for manufacturing. Both electric and IC are growing, but IC is growing at a faster rate in the same way that it declined at a faster rate. Despite the growth that we've already enjoyed in the last 2 years, more may be around the corner, and this optimism is reflected in our members' forecast for the future. Now, additional to the quarterly survey that ITA conducts to get members' forecasts for orders, its Suppliers Committee does an annual survey of members aimed at revealing future business trends in our industry. The complete survey is analyzed and highlighted at a panel session, which this year immediately follows the President's Forum. So that means I can conclude my remarks now by thanking you for listening and saying that a copy of this material will be placed on the ITA website, as it always is. If you'd like a copy, immediately just give me your business card and we'll make sure that you get one. As Mr. Atsuji-san said, the next year's President's Forum and Alliance meeting will be part of JIVA's annual meeting, which will be held in October in Kyoto. Thank you for listening. Mitch.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you once again to all of our presenters. I would like some guidance from Mr. Montwheeler, who's doing some semaphore activity. Questions? Very good. As indicated, anyone have any questions they'd like to share toward the middle? Bill will be coming down to collect them. Pass them down the table. Well, a couple of questions, and I guess, Bill, you said we will be sure to have a hard stop by 9:30, which will give it just about 10 minutes. So a couple of questions that came to mind as I was listening, and very intrigued by a lot of the economic data, although I am neither an economist nor an accountant. I'm a word person, thankfully. A question for all of the speakers. We are in a time of uncertainty and wondering how to best go about planning 6 months or a year in advance when the material handling industry seems to be doing very well, but the overall economy is flat at best. What are historical trends in your views? Is material handling a leading or a lagging indicator in a recession or recovery? Perhaps we start with Mr. Bolini and go down the table.
Yes, of course, it's a very good question. I would like just to take from another angle, if you permit me to do so. I want to mention your presentation is that when I talk about what next, you talk about speed and things like this. I think that's what's going to happen. What's going to happen probably is something never seen before. It's something that's, I would say, unpredictable, but for sure, whatever is going to happen will be characterized by high degree of volatile. So this means that you've been mentioning speed in terms to have products ready for the customer. I think that speed will be much more than that. Speed will be how fast we can develop new products. Will be how fast we can correct our mistake. Because I think that the new way of working will be forced to be faster and make mistakes. So it will be unavoidable. So the ability to correct mistakes, I mean speed in everything we do, because what is going to happen is extremely unpredictable. So this is my reading on your question, I think.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Liu, would you care to comment?
Even though the economic situation is not clear right now, I think the sales of China's industrial truck market will reach around 250,000 units in year 2011, which include 20,000 export units, which represent a totally 21% growth compared to 2010. China will still maintain its growth trend, but with a slower step.
中国经济包括工业车辆的发展，要看中国
In the
政
next
府
6 months,
对
Chinese
这个
government's control over price rise will have direct influence over the Chinese economy,
如果不能控制
including the
通货膨胀
material
加剧
handling
经济
industry.
可能会放缓。
If Chinese government could not have direct decent control over the inflation, it will have to come out with other policy and actions. Thank you.
ご質問のところを答えられれば
Well,
将来我が社は
if
大
I
発展する
am able to answer the question asked, our company would do very well. But it is a very difficult question. The thing that we are most interested are two things right now in our company and in Japan. One, we have the population issue. Few children being born today in Japan, and that is a big issue. The other issue is the currency issue. And for the time being, it is estimated that our appreciated yen is not going to change. And so for us to live in Japan, I think we need to extend into our neighboring countries, Southeast Asia and China, for our products. And also energy in the future is going to be an issue. We have been making products with engine, IC, but now we are putting more emphasis on electric or battery-operated ones. And I think this is an area we cannot take our eyes off. So that's my answer.
Yeah, Mitch, I think it's pretty clear that our industry is going to continue to be very, very cyclical. I remember thinking coming out of the 01-02 recession, which had a difference, between the peak and the valley of about 35%, that we would never again see fluctuations of that magnitude because of the way that I thought the U.S. government was managing the economy. Clearly, that was incorrect, and we far surpassed, those kinds of highs and lows during this last recession. I don't think that the material handling or the lift truck industry is a leading indicator, although I do think we're on the front edge of the economic cycles, just not on the cutting edge. In both the decline and the recovery, I think we're seeing that today. In terms of what we need to do to manage that kind of situation over time, I think internally you have to drive your break-even points down so that you can be profitable in the lowest of lows. There's no real insight in that, but I think it takes terrific organizational discipline to reduce costs when times are good and do the kinds of things you need to do. Externally, as Ratsuji-san suggested, I think you need to pay attention to those industries that tend to be less cyclical in times of economic change and pursue those markets with the appropriate products that allow you to some degree to insulate yourself from the cyclical nature of the industry.
Well, very good. As you've seen, I've been given the word that we will conclude at this point. Before we close, I would ask just your indulgence for a moment to please join me in a round of applause for this morning's presenters and the insight they shared.